for our first lab assignment, what we're going to do is look at the models that we have and find where those different membranes would be on the models. Okay, so we have 3 right here, and we'll have to share those. We also have a larger one at the back of the room. So if we could put like one here, one over here, and then another one somewhere in the middle, and then some of the people go to the back. We have to kind of spread out so we're not all looking at the same model, but just look at it and kind of go over where those different membranes would be. You can talk to the other people in your group and work together to figure that out. So I think we would end up having like 3 people with 1, 3 people, 3 people. Yeah, so like 2 or 3 people with each model, and spread out so that you're not, just too close together. Okay? So do that now and look in your lab book. In your lab book, it has more pictures. I have posted the lab on Moodle now, so it has scanned copies of the pictures from the book. And just take a few minutes to look at those models. The models are important because that's what you get tested on. When we have our exam, I'm not going to have pictures from your book. I'm going to have the models, the torsos for you to look at. Yes? The pre-lab is not graded. So that's just to kind of help you to prepare for the lab for that day, or to test yourself when you get done. You can use it either way. And but I don't grade the pre-lab. Right, and so you're looking for the membranes, right? So look for the visceral pleura, right? The parietal pleura, the visceral pericardium, the parietal pericardium, and then the visceral and parietal peritoneum, which would be down here. Now, you're not going to actually see the membranes. You need to look and find out where they would be, because the membranes would cover all of this so you wouldn't be able to see it, but you should be able to tell where it would be, and using the pictures in your book. Not yet. So pericardium, where's it going to be? It's around what organ? The heart, right. So pericardium is around the heart, all right? And you've got visceral, which would be which layer? The inner layer, which is right on the surface, right? Right on the surface of the heart. It covers the heart. So when you're looking at the heart, if you have one of the models that you could take the heart out, right? So it would be surrounding all of that. Right, on my model here, take the lungs off. So the pericardium is going to be on the surface of the heart, and then remember, with my fist was in the trash bag, right, and it folded over, and then that outer area, so in between the lungs there, in the mediastinum, is a little cavity there. What's the name of the cavity that the heart sits in? The name of the cavity. It's all in the thoracic cavity, but it's only the heart is in this cavity. Okay, it starts with a P. Pericardial, right. So the pericardial cavity is where the heart sits. So the pericardial cavity is surrounded by the pericardium, right? So the trash bag represents the pericardium. My fist represents the heart. The part of the trash bag that's touching my fist would be what? Starts with a V. Visceral. Visceral what? P, it starts with a P. Visceral pericardium. All right. I want you guys to repeat because you need to be able to say it, right? You might be thinking or like you don't want to say it out loud because you're afraid you're going to say it wrong. So repeat after me, okay? Visceral pericardium. Okay? Parietal pericardium. Pericardial cavity. Okay. So right now we're talking about the heart, and all of that is pericardial, right? What about when we go to the lungs? What layer is on the surface of the lungs? Visceral pleura, right. So with the lungs, we're going to be using the term pleura, right? So we've got the pleural cavity, which is where the lungs are. That's the space that the lungs fit into. You can see here, right? I took this lung out, but there's a space there that the lungs sit in, and that's the pleural cavity. So the visceral pleura would be right on the surface of the lung. The pericardial, the parietal pleura would be covering the cavity there. So on the inside of the rib cage, so here's the ribs right here, on the inside of the rib cage, around that whole cavity would be the parietal pleura. Okay, what about with the abdominopelvic organs? What's right on the surface? On the surface is always the V word. Visceral, peritoneum, okay, visceral peritoneum, and then what is it that lines this whole abdominopelvic cavity? Parietal peritoneum, okay? So you get your visceral and parietal layers first. Visceral is on the surface of the organ. Parietal is the outer layer. And then you have 3 different locations, right? So you've got your location in the abdominopelvic. That is peritoneum. Okay, you've got your location here around the lungs. That's pleura. And then your location right here around the heart is pericardium. Right? So you got to work on those 3. Now with your group that you're working with now, I want each one of you to go through and point out those different membranes where they would be. Work with your group. Try to help each other. If you have a way that you're going to remember it, that you want to share with your group, then you can talk about that. Just take a minute and go through each place, each location. I think you guys said the heart, right? And so the diaphragm stretches across the top of the liver, all right? And then the heart is right above it, and the lungs are right above it. So right here, This would be the diaphragm right here, under the heart, above the liver. Okay, the next thing that we're going to do is look at the organ systems. Okay, and so you've got one of the organ systems right here on the little rolly thing. What would that be? Skeletal system. Okay, so the skeletal system is made up of the bones. And you can see the individual bones would be the organs of the skeletal system. What are some of the functions of the skeletal system? What does it do for you? Okay, it helps you to be able to move because your muscles are going to be attached to it, right? Think about if you didn't have a skeleton. You'd be like a little blob, right? Like a worm or something. It gives you structure, right? And your overall shape. Are there any specific bones that protect?
Rib cage.
Right, your rib cage. What else? The skull. So those are protecting bones. So those are some of the major functions, as well as storage of calcium and other minerals, and also production of your blood cells. So in your bone marrow, you produce those blood cells, right? So that's the skeletal system. What about on the outside of of the little models there? You guys in the back don't have it on yours, but what do you see on the outside of those models? The muscular system, right? So the muscular system is also going to be working with the skeletal system for what function? Movement, right? So you have movement, contraction of the muscles. That is the main function of the muscular system. It also helps to keep you warm, right? Because as your muscles are moving, they're producing heat that helps to maintain your body temperature. Okay, and also your posture, keeping you upright, right? Have you ever seen somebody faint? Okay, when they faint, it's just like all their muscles just relax and they fall down, right? And just kind of flop. So when you're just sitting here, you may not feel like you're contracting your muscles, but you are. You're contracting your muscles just to sit here and be still, right? So maintaining that posture, keeping you upright. And then on the outside of the body here, we have the integumentary system, which is made up of the skin, the hair, and the nails, okay, and accessory glands that go along with the skin. What does your skin do? It's a very important function. What are some of the functions of the skin? Right, protection. So just protecting everything, keeping things out. It's your first line of defense against pathogens, diseases, things like that. Like you notice that if you get cut, right, your skin gets broken, then bacteria is able to get in there and can cause it to become sore, to get inflamed, things like that. So your skin is your first line of defense against pathogens. It's also keeping in your fluids, right? Keeping all the water from evaporating out. So it's a water barrier. And you kind of notice this if you've ever cooked chicken, right? And you have the chicken with the skin on it. If you leave the chicken with the skin on it sitting there, then it keeps it moisturized on the inside. But if you take off the skin, and even like if you grill, does anybody grill chicken? Okay, if you grill chicken, if you do the boneless, skinless, it dries out a lot faster, right? But if you have the skin on, it helps to keep more of that moisture in there. And our skin does the same thing. It helps to keep the moisture in and provides that barrier. Okay. We also talked about the skin having a role in that negative feedback. What was it doing? When you get too hot? Sweating, right? Temperature control. So your skin helps to keep you warm and it helps to keep you cool through the temperature controls. Also, being out in the sun. Have you ever heard of that being out in the sun has a beneficial property? What is that? Production of vitamin D, right? You have to have vitamin D to be able to absorb calcium, okay? So you have to have a little bit of sunlight to help you to produce that vitamin D, and your skin is where you're producing the vitamin D. Right, so those are all the three beginning systems that we have. Okay, what do you see up here? What do you think this one represents? The nervous system, right? See if you can find any organs of the nervous system on your models. Okay, I heard somebody say brain was there. You see anything else in there? Okay, the spinal cord. These models don't really have the nerves showing on them, but you would have nerves going out throughout the body. Okay, anything else that would be part of the nervous system? Okay, your eyes. Okay, your eyes are part of the nervous system. It's one of your special senses. It's actually, your eyes are formed from an outpocketing of your brain. And so all the tissue inside is nervous tissue. Okay, also inside of your ears. That's another part of the nervous system. So the nervous system, some of the functions, your senses, your intelligence, your personality, your memory, your response to different things, your instinct responses as well, learning, all of those things are part of the nervous system. Being able to react, your reflexes, okay? Sending impulses to your muscles so that you can move. That's all part of the nervous system. And maintaining control, basically, over the whole body. Your nervous system is a control center. Okay, then you also have the endocrine system. So see if you can find any parts of the endocrine system on your model. Okay, I mentioned the organ, the thymus. Okay, look and see if you can find the thymus. So use your diagram there. So here, this represents the thymus right here. Notice where it is. It's down close to the heart. Do any of the models have the thymus on it? They don't. Okay, and that's because the thymus, it produces hormones, but it's also part of your immune system. And the thymus, as you get older, it gets smaller. And the older you get, the smaller it gets. When you're a little baby, you have a large thymus in your chest. It's helping to produce immune cells, develop your immune system. And then the older you get, the smaller it gets, and you're less able to fight off infections when you get really old. Okay, so the thymus gets smaller. It's not on any of these models. Okay, what about the thyroid? See if you can find the thyroid on there. That's above the thymus. It's wrapped around the trachea here. Okay, the pancreas. See if you can find the pancreas in your torso. So you look for the stomach here. There's a large intestine. The pancreas is going to be at the bottom of the stomach, right here. Okay, so that's the pancreas. Okay, so the endocrine organs are involved with your system of hormones, producing hormones that travel throughout the body and have an effect on different body parts. Hormones are chemical messengers. So they're chemicals produced by the cells that then travel through the body to their target organ where they're going to affect that target organ. Okay? So it's got to work with the cardiovascular system to be able to send those hormones through the body. Okay, the cardiovascular system. Find parts of the cardiovascular system on your model. Okay, so you should have the heart and the blood vessels on there. And the different types of blood vessels are arteries and veins. Okay, what does the cardiovascular system do? It pumps blood through your body, right? And what's in the blood? Why do you have to circulate blood through your body? What's in it that's important? Oxygen is one thing. What else?
Cells.
Okay, some of your cells are going to be traveling in the blood, and the cells have specific functions in there, like your red blood cells that are carrying oxygen, your white blood cells that are your immune cells that are fighting infections, right? So those are important. What else? What about when you eat? The nutrients, right? So the nutrients has to be circulated through the body. What about all the stuff that you need to get rid of, right? So waste products have to circulate through the blood. So you can get rid of the carbon dioxide, and so you can get rid of your metabolic waste from metabolism within the cells. Okay, so that's the cardiovascular system. Up here, beside the cardiovascular system, we have the lymphatic system. Okay, I'm not sure on these models if it shows, if it's, the lymphatic system is usually represented with green. Do you see any green vessels on there? Okay, so it may not have it on there. On here, you can see like down inside there, you can see one green vessel here. The spleen. Okay, here's the spleen right here. Right, that's going to be part of the lymphatic system. The thymus is also part of the lymphatic system. Okay, and then you have lymph nodes and lymph vessels. Sometimes when you get a sore throat, you might get a swollen node right here in your neck. Have you ever had that? Like a swollen thing? Sometimes under your arm, you might get a swollen. When you're sick, your immune cells within those nodes are fighting the infection, and that causes them to swell up sometimes. So it's not, that doesn't mean that there's something wrong with it. It just means that it's working and sometimes it becomes swollen when they're really working. But you can feel them in your neck sometimes. All right, the next one's digestive. That's an easy one to find. Find the digestive organs. What do you think it starts with? Your mouth, right? So you're going to be bringing the food in with your teeth, your mouth, your oral cavity. What's the tube that goes from the oral cavity down to your stomach? Esophagus, right? Okay, and then from the stomach through the small intestines, the large intestines, the rectum, and then the anus. All right, then you also have accessory structures of the digestive system, like the liver. We mentioned the pancreas, the salivary glands, right? Those are structures that the food doesn't actually go through, but they secrete products that help in digestion. Okay, so what is digestion? We said digestive system. What's digestion?
A breakdown of food.
Right, breakdown of food, right? And into usable parts, right? Into the nutrients. Okay. Respiratory system. Okay, find the organs of the respiratory system. Got the trachea right here. This part, like right here in your throat, where your vocal cords are, that's your larynx. It's made up of larger cartilage. Okay, and your vocal cords are right inside of there. We commonly call that the Adam's apple, right? That's where your voice box is. And then the trachea coming down, it splits off, right? So back behind here, you can see there's a split there. Where are these tubes going? To the lungs. And do you know what those are called? The bronchi. Okay, so you have the right and the left bronchi, which are going to the lungs, and the lungs are where you're going to be exchanging carbon dioxide for oxygen, right? You're getting rid of the carbon dioxide, you're bringing in the oxygen. Okay, the next one here is the urinary system. Okay, see if you can find any parts of the urinary system on your model. You may have to remove the digestive system here. And you look down in the pelvic cavity right here, and you find the bladder. Okay? So the bladder is going to be storing the urine. What about these two brown bean-shaped things here? The kidneys. Okay, that's where urine is produced. The blood is filtered. So think about it. You drink some water. How does the water that you just drank get to your bladder? Through your digestive system, right? So it goes into your stomach, and then what happens? Okay, it gets absorbed, right? Gets absorbed into your blood. So you drink water, goes into your stomach, it gets absorbed into the blood, it gets circulated throughout the body, and it eventually goes to the kidneys. In the kidneys, you filter the blood, you take out some of the excess water and the waste, and then that filtered product then becomes urine. Then the urine goes from the kidneys down through these tubes here called the ureters into the bladder. You store the urine in the bladder, and then when you urinate, it goes through the urethra and then to the outside. Okay, so think about when you're drinking water or when you're eating, what's happening to this stuff? Where is it going? Why am I doing this? Why am I breathing? Why am I eating? Why am I drinking? All of those things, it's going places within your body. Okay, the last one is the reproductive system. Okay, so we have for the reproductive system, of course, we have different male and female reproductive organs. These models, I don't think either of these have the reproductive organs on it. We do have some models with the reproductive organs. They're not all put together right now, but you can see in the diagram there, you have reproductive organs. The function, of course, is to reproduce the species, to make offspring. And so in order to do that, we have the female reproductive organs that are going to be making eggs and nurturing the baby or the fetus, and then childbirth, and then taking care of the baby after the baby is born. So feeding it through the mammary glands, and then for the male reproductive system, producing sperm and delivering the sperm to the female reproductive tract. So the reproductive system, the main functions, producing the gametes, and then for the female reproductive system, it has more functions. Okay? And again, some of these organs are involved in other systems. Hormones, right? When you think about male and female hormones, right? So that is also part of the endocrine system. Testosterone and estrogen are hormones that are produced within the reproductive system as well as the endocrine system. Okay? So some system or some organs have more than one system that they belong to. So here's a list of the organ systems, the major organs, and their functions. You definitely need to study this table. Okay? So that's important to go through and study that. All right, in your lab book, you also have some of the same information there. You have a picture of the torso with things labeled on it. So that can help you to go through. I want you to look at the torsos right now, and I'm going to ask you to find a particular organ and see if you can find it. Okay? So I want you to find the liver. On the torso, on your model. Find the liver. Okay, did y'all find it? Right, find the pancreas. I don't know if those little ones, did they come apart in the middle? I can't remember. Okay, you can't see anything behind it. Okay. Find a skeletal muscle. Okay, find a bone. Where would the visceral pericardium be? Visceral pericardium. Where would that be? Pericardium. On the heart, right? So on the surface of the heart. All right, some different lifespan changes. It's always important to think about how we have changes throughout our lives. So when we'll look at what happens with babies and young children, and then adolescents, and then as you continue on through life and get to the elderly. And so some of those changes, of course, hair loss, changes in color of the hair, reduction in fat, subcutaneous fat under the skin. The percentage of fat in the tissues tends to increase, but the fat under the skin tends to decrease. Okay, your metabolic rate decreases. So decreased production of certain hormones, of enzymes, and changes in the nervous system as well. Okay, let's stop for just a second. Okay, I want everybody to stand up and stand in anatomical position. Okay, this diagram here is anatomical position. So what are some of the things that you are noticing about anatomical position? What about the hands? Facing forward, right? So your palms are facing forward. The thumbs are facing away from the body, right? What else? We're standing up, right? So that's one thing. What about the head? Facing forward. It's upright, facing forward. It's not over to one side or turned, or it's facing forward. What about the feet? Forward, on the ground, slightly apart, right? So this is anatomical position. And the significance of it is that anytime we're describing a organ or a body part, we're describing it as if it is in anatomical position, okay? So even if, let's say we have a patient and they're laying down on a bed, okay? And with them laying on the bed, maybe they're face down, right? And they're laying on the bed, we would still refer to their body parts as if they were in anatomical position, okay? Let's say we have a specimen that we are dissecting, okay? The head is always going to be superior to the shoulders, okay? Whether they are laying down or standing up, because it's in anatomical position that we are using these terms, okay? So that's important to know what anatomical position means. And then remember, when you're reading and you're reading a description of a location, it's always going to be in anatomical position. Okay? All right. Okay, you can sit back down now. You guys can go back to your desk too.
See, mine will be laying down there.
Yes, it would. Yeah, but the anatomical position term is for the locations of the organs, anything like that. But then there's other terms for body movements and other ways that the body is positioned. Okay, but anytime you're looking at a description, like say for instance of the intestines. Okay, so the small intestines, they have the different parts named for the small intestines. Those parts are going to be described as if the individual is in anatomical position, not as if they were laying down, but if they are standing up like that. Okay, with the bones, that's an example. So like with the skeleton, you could see Okay, if you're reading a description of the bone and you're trying to find a particular bone in the body, okay, specifically, let's say in the arm, and you're looking for the radius, all right, and let's say, you're looking at skeletons like this, and the description's not making sense to you, or the arm is like this, and it's not making sense to you, or it's above the head. It's not you got to think about it. Okay, how can I think about the skeleton in anatomical position, right? So the arm is going to be like this. The thumb is going to be like that. Here's the radius right here. So it's going to be on the lateral side of the forearm. The radius is on the lateral side of the forearm. That means that it's the outer side away from the body. And the ulna is on the medial side of the forearm. It's on the side that's closest to the body. So you've got those terms, lateral and medial. Now, if the arm was turned like this, it would be the opposite, right? And that wouldn't make sense. So you always have to think about it in anatomical position. All right, so the radius, you would always say, is on the lateral side, and the ulna is on the medial side. Okay, so that's why we have that anatomical position for those descriptions. Okay, some other terms we have inferior and superior. Okay, so superior meaning above, and inferior meaning below. Okay, so give me an example of an organ or a body part that is superior to the diaphragm. Okay, the lungs are superior to the diaphragm. They're above the diaphragm. Give me an example of an organ that is inferior to the diaphragm. It's below. Okay, the kidneys, any of the organs below. What's that big one that's right below the diaphragm?
Liver.
The liver, right? Okay, so the liver is inferior to the diaphragm. Okay, anterior or ventral and posterior or dorsal. And you notice there's two terms there. So we have anterior or ventral. That's going to be the front, okay? Ventral is always referring here to where you have this abdominopelvic and all of this. This is ventral, okay? Anterior refers to the location of where the face is. But for humans, since our face is pointing in the same direction as our abdomen, they mean the same thing. Think about a dog, okay? So for four-legged animals, here's my dog. Okay, so for the dog, we've got, this is going to be ventral, and this is going to be anterior. Okay, this is going to be dorsal, and this is going to be posterior. Okay, for a human, ventral and anterior are both in the same plane. Dorsal and posterior are both in the same plane, right? Because we're standing up, right? So it's different for four-legged animals. Why am I telling you this? Well, because we're going to be doing dissections on the, we do the sheep brain, and we do cow eyes, okay? And then later on in 169, I like to do the heart, like a sheep heart or pig heart. And also sometimes we do kidneys. So later on, when you're looking at these organs of other animals, you have to remember that they have different body planes than we do. And so a ventral surface is not going to be the same thing as an anterior surface. But for humans, it is the same. Okay? Medial and lateral. I already explained that, right? So what was medial? So like on your arm, right? So this is the medial side because it's closer to the midline. Right? An example of a term with lateral and medial. Your nose is medial to your ears. Your nose is closer to the middle than your ears are. Your ears are lateral to your nose. They're towards the outside, further away from the midline. Okay? You have a lateral and medial side of each eye. Okay, the medial side of the eye is going to be right there in the corner at your nose. The lateral side of your eye is going to be out here towards the outside. Okay, with your hand, you have the lateral side of the hand. Your thumbs are lateral to the rest of the fingers. Your pinkies are the medial most fingers because they're closest to the midline going straight down the body. Okay? What about the heart? The heart is medial to what other organs? The lungs, right? So the heart is medial to the lungs. It's in the middle. The lungs are lateral to the heart. Okay? Bilateral and ipsilateral. So bilateral are paired structures. They're found on both sides of the body, right? So, for instance, your eyes are going to be bilateral. Your arms are bilateral. Your kidneys are bilateral, okay? Ipsilateral is on the same side, and contralateral is when you're talking about opposite sides. So ipsilateral, you may say like the arm and the leg, right, are going to be on the same side. There may be pain in both the arm and the leg on the left side of the body, okay? And then contralateral would be, let's say you had something going on with your left hand and your right foot, right? So that's opposite sides of the body, okay? Proximal and distal. Okay, proximal and distal. An example with that is, let's say, the elbow. Okay, so here's the elbow right here, and proximal is going to be closer to the attachment to the trunk. So your trunk is this part. Your shoulder attaches your arm to the trunk. So the elbow is proximal to the hand, all right? You're always referring back to the attachment here to the body, all right? So what I'm saying is the elbow is closer to my shoulder, to this attachment, than my hand is, right? So the hand is further away from this attachment. So the elbow is proximal to the hand, right? It's closer up here than the hand is. The hand is distal to the elbow. The hand is further from this attachment than my elbow is. Okay? Another example, just look at your hand, okay? How many bones do you have in each finger? You got 3 bones in each finger, right? Except for the thumb. Thumb has how many bones? 2 bones. Okay? So let's look at the thumb first. We have the proximal bone here, which is the one closest to the hand. And then we have the distal bone here. Okay, so those are phalanges. Those bones in your fingers are called phalanges. So you got proximal and distal. Okay, then your other fingers, we said there's 3 bones, right? So I want you to find the proximal phalanx of the pinky finger. The proximal phalanx of the pinky finger. So try to find that. Point to it. The proximal. Proximal is going to be the bone that's closest to the hand, right? To that attachment. So it's that one right there. Okay? Then the distal would be which one? The distal phalanx. That would be that one right there, right? And what do you think that one's called? The one in the middle is middle. Okay, so we've got proximal, middle, and distal phalanges. Okay, those are the bones of the fingers. Right, so we don't use like superior and inferior for that. We use proximal and distal because we're talking about in relation to the point of attachment. And remember, it's in anatomical position, right? So we have this phalanx is proximal to the rest of them. It's closer to the attachment here on my hand than the rest of these phalanges are. Okay. Also, let's say in the small intestines. Okay, the small intestines are divided up into different sections. The proximal most section of the small intestines, so where it attaches to the stomach, okay, is called the duodenum. So that part of the small intestine is the closest to the attachment of the stomach. Okay, the middle section is called the jejunum. And the distal section is called the ileum. Okay, so you have proximal, middle, and distal there. And it's all referring back to where it attaches to the stomach. The distalmost portion is furthest from that attachment. All right, the foot and the ankle. Those are probably, proximal and distal can be the trickiest because you can switch them around. All right, let's see if you can fill in the blank for this. The ankle is blank to the knee. Is it proximal or distal? It's distal, right? The ankle is further away from your hip, right, where your leg attaches, than your knee is. Okay? Your foot is blank to your knee. So what would that be? Distal. The knee is blank to the foot. Proximal. The knee is closer to your hip than your foot is. So the knee is proximal to the foot, meaning that it's closer to the attachment than the foot is. You always have to refer back to the attachment to the trunk. So you're talking about either the hip, you're talking about the shoulder, you're talking about, like with the fingers, you're talking about the hand, right? So think about the attachment to the body. You've got some examples in your book that you can go through with that as well. And then we've got superficial and deep. Okay, so superficial, closer to the surface. Deep is underneath. Okay. What is an organ that is the most superficial on the body?
Skin.
The skin, right. So the skin is superficial, and then what would be deep to the skin? What's right under the skin? Okay, there's a little layer right in between there before you get to the muscles. What tissue is that? Helps to cushion and keep you warm. There's a fat layer there. Okay, have you heard of the hypodermis? or subcutaneous, right? A hypodermic needle, heard of that before? Because it goes into the hypodermis, okay? So it's right under the skin. It's a fat layer. It helps to cushion and keep you warm. So that is deep to the skin. Okay, the skin is superficial to the hypodermis. Okay, let's see, what's another example for you? Okay, the pericardium. Okay, remember we talked about the pericardium. Which layer is most superficial of the pericardium? Starts with a P. Parietal pericardium is more superficial, right? Because it's closer to the surface than the visceral pericardium is. Visceral pericardium is the deeper layer. Okay, here we've got these positions in anatomical position here. Another thing to remember is right and left. Okay, you got to remember that it is the specimen or the individual that you are looking at. It's their right and left, not yours. Okay, so for instance, okay, this is my left, this is my right. But when you're looking at me, my left is on your right, right? So let's say you're looking at the heart, the right side of the heart. It's not if you're looking at the heart, what is your right or left? It would be if that heart was inside a person, which side is right and left? Okay, and that confuses people sometimes because you're looking at a heart that's been taken out. Right, so you've got like these hearts at the back. Okay, and we have the right atrium and the left atrium and the right ventricle and the left ventricle of the heart. Okay, and when I'm looking at it, I'm thinking, okay, this is the left. No, that's the right side of the heart because that is this person's right or left side. Okay, so it always helps if you hold it in position like if it was your own heart, right? And then you can look at, okay, this is the right side, this is the left side. So the right atrium would be up here, the right ventricle would be right here, the left ventricle would be over here, and the left atrium would be right here. So remember that right and left side difference there. Okay, also on here you can see you've got that midline. And so what terms were we using that were in relation to the midline? Medial, and then what's further away? Lateral, right? So lateral and medial, okay? What about in relation to this connection right here? What's further away? Distal. Closer? Proximal. Okay. What about towards the top? Superior, right. What organ is at the top up here above your spinal column? Your brain. Your brain is superior, right? So you could say your brain is superior to your vertebral column or your spinal cord. Okay, inferior, that's going to be below. Okay, we talked about the diaphragm. We talked about the liver, right? The intestines are inferior to the stomach. They're below the stomach. Okay, posterior or dorsal. Always remember dorsal because I think about the dolphin. Our mascot is the dolphin, right? And dolphins have that dorsal fin, right? The fin on the back, that's the dorsal fin. Okay, it's on their back. Dorsal is towards the back. Ventral is towards the stomach. Okay. Posterior towards the back, anterior towards the front. Okay, different body sections or planes. All right, when we're looking at the body, sometimes it is helpful to be able to look at it in certain planes or sections. And a lot of times different imaging techniques will allow you to be able to look at specific sections. Or if you're looking at a slide, it might be like a slice from a particular organ, and it might tell you that it's a cross section or that it's a longitudinal section, right? So those terms are important to learn. So we have sagittal, and that's longitudinal. Think longitudinal is the long way, okay? So a sagittal section would be cutting this way, all right? Mid-sagittal is going to be right down the middle, all right? That's longitudinal. It divides the body into right and left sides, okay? It may not be right down the middle. Mid-sagittal is always right down the middle, or a median section right down the middle, but it may be off to one side, right? So that would be a parasagittal. Transverse or horizontal, okay? The horizon, that's when you look out and you're seeing the land like this, okay? So horizontal goes across this way, right? Horizontal or transverse is going across in this plane. So you may be looking like at a sagittal section of the heart would be cut like this. A transverse section of the heart would be cut like this, okay? Coronal or frontal. So that would be like if you had a section that divided the body into front and back, okay, would be coronal or frontal. And think about like a crown, but if you were wearing the crown like this and not like that, okay? So it would be a coronal, would be front and back. Here's a diagram. You have this in your lab book as well, and it shows these different sections. So here's a mid-sagittal section where you can see that it cuts right down the middle of the brain and inside of the cavities of the skull. Right here, you can see this is a frontal section of the knee, and you can see the femur and the tibia there. This would be a transverse or horizontal section there where you're looking like down in there and you can see cross section of the organs. Then you've got parasagittal and mid-sagittal there. Parasagittal's over to one side. We may just be talking about one particular organ cut with these different planes. So here we have the brain where you can see the sagittal section, you could see what a transverse section would look like, and you could see what a frontal section would look like. Right. Also, for instance, with the bone, we've got a cross section. Cross section would also be called horizontal, right, or transverse. And then we've got oblique. Oblique is at an angle. Here we have longitudinal. Okay, I think in your book, kind of the thing with the banana. Maybe not. I guess they took that out. There used to be an activity where you take a banana and you cut it in different planes. So you get longitudinal would be cutting the banana the long way, right? It's on the one, that's right, it's on the one that I copied and put on Moodle, but it's not in the lab manual itself.
Are we for learning outcomes you want to talk about labor?
No, not for lab, but for lecture, yes. Good question. Okay, so the next thing is the body regions and quadrants. Okay, body regions and quadrants. So here, what does quad mean, first of all? Quad means 4. So when we divide the body up, or the abdominopelvic region up into 4 parts, that's our quadrants. The quadrants are really easy too, because we've just got upper and lower and right and left. So those are easy. All right, you just got to remember, right? I'm looking at this picture, and this is my left, but this is this person's right. Right? And then this is my right, but this is this person's left. Okay, so you got to remember that when you're writing down your answers. So we've got right upper quadrant, also abbreviated RUQ. Okay, then we've got right lower, we've got left upper, and left lower. Okay, that can be useful when you are describing where maybe pain is, or you have a patient that is saying that they're having pain in this area here, you know, and you could describe that as the right upper quadrant. Okay, so and then what organs are in that area? Let's say they're having pain right here, and it's kind of below the rib cage, right? And it's in that right upper quadrant. Common pain that people might have there, like a very strong pain, might be the gallbladder. Okay, so that's where the gallbladder is. So you would see where the pain is, and then you would try to figure out, well, what organs are in that area? What could be affected? What's something common that people complain about from that area? Okay, and then over here we have the regions. So these are abdominal regions. So remember, with quadrants, we've got 4, but over here it's divided up into 9. Okay, so there's 9 regions there. And they can be a little bit tricky sometimes, but if you look at it, let's try to look at it logically. Umbilical. What's in the umbilical region?
Belly button.
Your belly button. You know about your umbilical cord, right? That was attached to your belly button when you were born. Okay? So that's the umbilical region. Okay? Then we've got the epigastric region. Epi means above. Gastric is referring to the stomach. So above the stomach is the epigastric region. This book has switched to pubic region. It used to be called the hypogastric, but now they're calling it the pubic region. Okay, so that's a little bit easier to remember. This is your pubic area. So below the umbilical is the pubic region. region. Over here, to the side is the lateral region, and this would be right, and this would be left. So this is right here in the middle. Right? Then we have the inguinal regions. Okay, so here your hip bones, these are your ilia. So that's referring to the ilia, the inguinal, right? So they're on the right and the left sides. And then up here, you have cartilage here in your rib cage, and cartilage is this chondriac, okay? So that's where that term chondriac comes from, is from the cartilage. So you have the right hypochondriac, so hypo means below, so below the cartilage, and you have the left hypochondriac, so right and left hypochondriac. All of these are regions, okay? So when you get a grid like that, don't put quadrants on it, right? So quad, you've got to get a grid like this where there's 4. So that's going to be quadrants. That's going to be the 9 regions, okay? So you need to study that and look at that in your book. Okay, so we're out of time. There's one last thing, which is just the overall regions. So you need to complete your lab assessment too. The diagrams and everything that are in that lab assessment need to be completed. There's some matching questions. There's some fill in the blank things, labeling. So make sure that you do those questions for lab assessment 2. For your lab assessment 1, I'll take those up now. If you forgot to bring it back, make sure that you upload it to Moodle where it says exercise 1 lab. You can put it on Moodle. If you do it by today, then it won't be counted late. If you do it after today, then it gets counted late.
Can we tear it out?
Yes. If you have a book that you can tear pages out of, like that you own, you can tear it out. And remember, I only need the assessment part. I don't need the whole lab. If you have a book that you can't tear pages out of, then you can take the pictures and you can upload it to Moodle. But the answers do need to be on the page. I don't want you to just write answers on a piece of notebook paper and try to turn that in, because it's so hard for me to grade that. It needs to be on the page. This thing right here is one.
So like on the last one, it says to like discuss about the.
That's fine.
Yeah,
We didn't do that.
Okay.
did we?
That was it.
Yeah, we didn't.